Hey y'all, and welcome back to another video of My Creative Life with Kel Sweetie, where we read books, we make art, and essentially do whatever our creative hearts desire. Today, we are covering my June wrap-up and my July TBR, both of which are surprisingly long in some way because I ended up getting an arc. I ended up having a long TBR for June to begin with. Still didn't finish all the books on my TBR, but still managed to read a lot of books. And then July, I'm actually participating in Gabby Reed's Summerween Challenge. So let's get into it because we've got a lot of ground to cover. There's a lot of books here. So as I said in the intro, this month was a lot. I somehow got into a reading slump, lost 2 weeks, and then somehow pushed out 4 books in 2 weeks this month and still didn't finish my entire TBR. Let's just recap. My original TBR was, what was my original TBR? Several People Are Typing, The Z Word, Sorrowland, The Trees Grew Because I Bled There, Her Body and Other Parties, Survivor Story, Come Out, Come Out, Night of the Living Queers. That was 8 books. I had 8 books somehow on my June TBR for Pride because I got overzealous. There's no other way that I can explain it. Everything sounded amazing. I was trying to get as much rep as possible, which, you know, I've talked so much already in my last video for my June TBR video about how getting ace and intersex representation in the books that I was reading was really super hard. So continue please giving me recommendations. I want to continue reading, you know, queer books throughout the rest of the year. It's not just simply we read queer in June and then that's it. Just like we don't just read Black authors in February and then say, okay, we did our jobs. The idea of diversifying your shelves during a month that we're celebrating people is to find more books that you couldn't possibly just fit into 1 month and spread it out throughout the year. I think some people sometimes forget that. So I'm putting that out there. But I still read a good amount of books. I think all in all I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I read 6 books. That's still crazy amount considering my original TBR was like, did we count 7 before? Did we count 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, we counted 8. 8 was the original number. So I was 2 off. But considering I usually average around 4 to 5 books per month, and even last month I read 4. Technically 5, but one of those was an audiobook that was a short story, so I'm not entirely counting it. But it was a really great reading month. I only had 1 book that didn't do well, and it did put me in a mini reading slump, and we will talk in depth about my anger around this book because I feel like a lot of people got bait and switched on this book. And we will get into it in a moment. But let's start off with the book that I read actually last month, but didn't get to doing a review about it in my last wrap-up. And it felt appropriate. I kind of reviewed it on around the 1st or 2nd of June because of how appropriate it felt. Because it was sapphic, and that was Carmilla. I really did love reading this book, which I feel not great about because the author of this book, Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, he stole the story. He found these letters from a Veronica, let me not butcher these names, Veronica Housley, and a professor. And she basically, and the reason why she was explaining this before I get too far into this, she was explaining her relationship with a Marcia, who was an aristocrat from a Spaniard of some sort, Cuban Spaniard to be exact, and she was sending these letters to a professor. And he was a professor of the supernatural. That's why she was explaining all of this, because she was just talking about how strange the relationship was and how mesmerizing it was, almost like it wasn't real, in the sense of like Marcia being real as like she's Carmilla in this situation, and Veronica's the Laura. He found these letters and basically took Veronica's story with this woman and turned it into Carmilla. There's inspiration, and then there's just ripping from somebody else's life. I do recommend that you pick up the version that is edited by Carmen Maria Machado in this, who we will talk about later. I did read from her finally. One, because this cover is amazing. Let's get into it. Just let's take that in. Right? Gorgeous. Just absolutely gorgeous. The little bite marks here, the vintage antique bat type. Who designed this book cover? Jacket art by Ernest Haeckel. Cover design by Kimberly Glidell. Love it. Absolutely love it. It's like the perfect like red. It's gorgeous. And the reason why I know that LaFanu stole this is because Carmen Maria Machado basically did the work of doing a lot of research, as well the research of another professor who basically did research, who found out that he had stole this entire book. So, getting that out the way, then I'm a little upset about that. It's a great book, but wasn't his story to tell. Anyways, I did love this. I think I gave Carmilla a 3.5. What I didn't enjoy and why it wasn't like higher, wasn't necessarily a relationship between Carmilla and Laura, because one thing about this is sapphic. It's not all pining for one another in this Pride and Prejudice Jane Austen way, like will they, won't they, do they actually love each other? We have to read between the lines. This girl was shacking up with this girl in her daddy's house. It was, there was just longing stares and glances, and Carmilla just wanted to give her entire life to Laura, but in another second she couldn't stand her. It was very clearly the stereotype and the template for every lesbian romance. Which I loved. I loved that. I loved that it felt modern, their relationship. I loved that Carmilla was dark and Laura was pulled in by that. I love that Laura didn't feel stupid to me. I don't feel like she felt ditzy, which I think is always an issue in these, in books like these that are older and are supposed to be sapphic. There's always, how did you get lured in, you know? And I didn't necessarily feel that from Laura. It felt very genuine, their relationship. What I didn't like was the ending. The first half, amazing. I mean, you were just there for the ride. And then near the second half, maybe last third of the book, it felt like LaFanu had a deadline. And he had to speed it up. Because all of a sudden it just felt like shit hit the fan. And of course it ends with all the priests and Laura's dad and all these men in this town basically going with no real proof that Carmilla is a vampire and we have to kill her. And then they basically stab a stake through her heart with no real evidence that she was ever actually a vampire per se. Which was just a little too on the nose for the Victorian era, you know? And it just felt rushed at the end. I don't even know if it's necessarily that ending because, again, it's the time that it was written, the time that it takes place. It makes sense. It's very much a witch trial, basically. But the ending just felt sped up, and for the first half to be as enticing as it was, and then basically just hit a left out of nowhere, it was jarring, and it felt like we could have gotten, I didn't need it to just be a novella. Like, we could have maybe gotten 50 more pages just to flesh out the ending, instead of it just kind of all of a sudden happening. But still, I am happy I finally read this. I get why it's stood the test of time. Again, I feel like the relationship itself doesn't feel dated, although the ending very much is. Another reason to pick up this version, look at these illustrations. Throughout the book, there are these gorgeous illustrations. It's just so, like, look at this. Ugh. And then here's this one. When I say that, like, they're not leaving anything to, you know, the imagination, like you can't really talk your way through this one, this is what I mean. This part of the book right here, the L word could never. Like, it is clear as day. These women are in love with each other. They're involved. So, I do recommend it. It's literally only, like, what, 132 pages or something? Maybe a little less than that. I think the audiobook was 3 hours, if that. So, finished it in no time, and a big payoff. Really enjoyed myself. I think it was a 3.5 I gave it. The next book that I read after Carmilla, it was either I read it after Carmilla or I read it after The Vegetarian. It was a weird end of the month last month. But point is, the next book that we'll be talking about is Several People Are Typing by Calvin Kasuke. I enjoyed this book a lot. Now, I did give it a 3. It's a very weird book. It's like one of those books you appreciate, but maybe it's not your favorite book of the year. Personally, I feel that way. This book is completely written in Slack messages. Very, very interesting. I love books that aren't traditional in their interiors. I've gotten a newfound respect for the work that goes into making a book like House of Leaves happen. Like, that's the opius of all interiors, to be honest. But this entire book is written in Slack messages. You even have portions right here where everything gets corrupted. And I love things like that because it just feels so, like, you're so involved, like you're in the story. This story is about our main character, Gerald, who basically works from home at some agency. And one day, he tries to upload a spreadsheet to Slack for, I don't even remember what the spreadsheet was for. It was something nominal. And his consciousness gets pulled into Slack. Doesn't know how, but he does. He gets pulled in by this kind of, like, entity of AI, which is the Slack bot. And everyone, of course, doesn't believe him. He's still typing out, his consciousness is typing out that, hey, I'm stuck in here. Of course, the employees and his boss doesn't realize that, like, he's serious. Of course, his productivity goes up because what else is he going to do when he's stuck in a Slack? It's very fever dream-esque and very contained. A lot of vibes and not really plot. But what I did love about this that made it, like, kind of 3 status was there's these moments that Gerald is stuck in the void. And he has these moments of realizing these just different things that I felt like were so insightful, especially for the day and age that we're in right now. One of the things that he brought up that really had me think a lot was about social media. And how social media really is just this concentrated space of the entire world. And that means the worst of the world and the absolute best of the world. So especially right now, I felt like it was extremely relevant for what we're dealing with right now, where you have a literal genocide going on in many different countries right now. Like, not just one. And you're putting out the word about these things. You're seeing video and evidence of it all happening. And then you scroll a little bit and then you come to a reel full of puppy dogs, or somebody helping a child, or somebody elderly or whatever, or like some kid does something hilarious or whatever. And you scroll a little bit more and you find out some new anti-trans bill has come out. And you scroll a little bit more and you find some new book recommendation or some gorgeous art that you've never seen by somebody. And that it's extremely jarring and it's not natural to be basically flung around on a roller coaster of emotions like that because of how much information we're getting. And I thought that that was really, he talks about it more in the book, but that's kind of like what the purpose is that he starts talking about, is the idea of us being all things at once, and how we're constantly in this state of trying to see things as one thing or in black and white when we are nothing but shades of gray. And that's very hard for us to understand because we want to put people in these spaces as well as ourselves. Am I being insensitive if I put out this news that's happening in Congo that is absolutely brutal in a reel, and then turn around and then post a book review? Because then the question is when will it be appropriate for me not to post those things again? And the answer really is that it never will be, because these things are always going to be happening in the world, and because of the time we live in, we will know about them because of information. And it's just like, that's crazy to think about, you know? Just metaphysical, like, all logical type of stuff where it just causes you to reflect. There were moments in the book like that, and that's what I really loved about this novel. The story of him getting stuck in the slack and everything, well, that was interesting, of course. The love affair that ends up happening in here, our main character is bisexual, and there's another character within this that is a gay male, and that was interesting. I feel like it was kind of thrown in just to make it. And this is written by Calvin Kalsuke, is a trans author. It felt very like, it's not that the relationship itself felt forced. It just felt like not necessary for the book itself. I think I was more interested in the relationship when they were really working with the idea of being co-workers, turning into friends who knew each other more than anything, and like tripping into that, not on purpose. And even that was interesting because, especially if you're constantly working, the idea of co-workers and friends is a very blurred line sometimes because of how much you see them. I thought that was interesting. And then like kind of a love affair situation got thrown in, and it felt a little bit like rushed, like it kind of came out of nowhere. Although I liked both characters together, I didn't know if it necessarily added much to the story. So, again, it was a 3 for me. I really enjoyed it enough to get the hard copy. It wasn't like, oh, everyone in the world should read this book. But I think that it really did bring up some very interesting topics. And again, it being entirely in Slack messages is just really interesting. The next book I read put me in a 2-week slump. It took me 2 weeks to read this book, which is also probably why I didn't finish my TBR this month. Because if I would have finished it, I could have at least knocked out one more book. Even though I will say 2 of the books I didn't finish were physicals. And I think that if I don't really knock out a good chunk of my physical copies during my monthly reading sprints, it ain't gonna happen that I'm probably gonna finish it. Especially as busy as I've been lately, to like read before I go to sleep or something. That's really how I knocked out The Black Girl Who Survives in this one, as well as Peach Pit. I just had the time to like read before I fell asleep. I do want to finish reading Night of the Living Queers though, because it was really amazing, as well as Come Out, my first dark romance, and I was enjoying it. I've been enjoying it. So there you go. But that book is The Z Word. The Z Word by Lindsay King Miller. I gave that one a 2. And the more I think about it, the more I want to give it really a 1.5. Barely even that. I feel like it may even be close to a 1 soon. I get upset by this book. The way that it was pitched was that it's about our main character. I don't even remember the names anymore, really. So that's mainly because I've been trying to flesh it out of my mind, and I read amazing books after it that just got rid of it. But it has our main character, and she's going to Pride, and the zombie apocalypse basically breaks out at Pride. I was like, that sounds interesting. That sounds fun. Bisexual representation, love it. And the author is a queer woman. It's like, okay, this is cool. Love the cover. Let's read it. The main character is not likable. And that, as I've said before, that's not a problem for me, but it is important for you to be interesting even if you're not likable. And she wasn't interesting either. She felt she felt like a stereotype of bisexuals, which was very insulting as somebody who's bisexual. They wrote this character to basically be sniffing behind her ex-girlfriend, who they had recently just broke up with one another. It's never necessarily clear as to why they really broke up, to be honest. It just seems very chaotic for whatever reason. It never really gave a substantial reason as to why the breakup happened. And then she's at the same, house party as her, along with a couple of other friends of hers. They had thrown this event with this, in collaboration with this company called like Seabreeze or something. They're a hard seltzer company that basically is rainbow washing their entire brand. This other character gets involved. He's a drag queen. Logan, I think is his name, but their drag name is Black Depravity or something about along those lines. He probably had tons of personality. He was actually interesting. The thing about this book was that all the secondary characters were far more interesting than the primary characters. And honestly, they were the only reason you wanted to keep on reading. Never mind the fact that they were pretty much all people of color were all the secondary characters. Which, again, like I just keep thinking more and more about this book and it's just giving, wow, part of the problem still. He became a love interest as well to our main character, and there seems to be this kind of love triangle situation, where she can't pick which one she loves or likes. It kind of perpetuates the stereotype of bisexuals being confused, which I wasn't a fan of. And there's a way to do that and not display it as like feeling this confusion and just indecisiveness and everything. And I feel like that's how it was portrayed. I don't want to give away too much, even though I'm not necessarily a proponent of like saying you should go out and read the book. But some of the things that start happening, the twists, you kind of started to see coming, and they weren't really explained as to why they were even happening in the first place. Like, they didn't make sense. Our main character is constantly complaining that she doesn't feel a part of the community, which at first, being bisexual and with a lot of the rampant biphobia that's been happening as of late within the community as well as without, it felt like, oh, this feels relevant. Her reasoning for feeling not involved was really down to the fact that she just wasn't being involved. All of her friends were planning things and being a part of events and this, that, and the other. All she had to do was just raise her hand and walk in and start doing things, as opposed to a lot of people feeling displaced without not being in the community, because of a lack of that like friendship or community to start with that's even involved in it. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to get involved. Or just the fact that sometimes bisexuality it doesn't feel, a lot of people don't validate it as being queer because of, especially if you're in a male hetero-seeming relationship. None of that was touched on, and it was not explained that way, which was annoying. But I think the thing that was most disgusting kind of about it was after I had read it and realized what had happened, our two main characters who are involved with each other are both white women, and they're actually one of the few white characters in the book. They're the primary characters, and other than one other person, I'm pretty positive they are the only white women in the book. The rest are people of color. Aurelia was kind of like a house mother and is a lesbian. I believe she's Latina. Bo, who's like a butch lesbian who is like a gray fox, a silver fox and everything. She also is Latina as well. Logan is a black man, all these people. And you realize that both of these people, one, our main character multiple times, has no backbone, explains many times that she's not standing up for other people, doesn't know how to do it, At one point, she is multiple times asked to call the police while being surrounded by plenty of people of color who do not feel like it's the right idea because of their feelings around feeling safe, and they actually end up in a situation where that is proven correct. That is exactly what they shouldn't have done. And there's also a circumstance where a lot of what's happened is the fault of one of the main characters. And a lot of people die because of the selfishness of one of the main characters. And it felt far too much like the author had never taken a race theory class. And it proved far too much that just because you're a part of a marginalized group does not mean that you aren't part of the problem towards another marginalized group whatsoever. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of white queers, a lot of people in the community who are white, who are still a part of the problem of racism because they still have not done they think that like they're down just because like I also am pitted against and there's hatred towards me. And yes, that is true. But just as somebody who is also of color can be racist towards another person of color because of their stereotypes and microaggressions and this, that, and the other, you can as well. Just because things happen to you does not mean that you are abstained from being a part of the issue, being a part of the problem, especially if you are not reflecting or hearing out any of these stories. And that's exactly what this felt like entirely. It was extremely upsetting after I've started to think more and more about it, and it felt like a waste of time. It also felt boring. I mean, just as a story, it was boring. And for a book about pride and zombies, you have to be trying really hard to make it boring. And I was bored. I was especially bored near the last half because it felt like it's starting to get convoluted. There's no connection to the characters anymore because I was over them. Yeah, it just wasn't a great time. And I also felt like they just threw every representation in there just to do it. And they all kind of felt like stereotypes. So I don't know, at first I was worried it was just me because a lot of people I'd seen trying to read this book at the start of Pride Month. But as time has gone on, I've seen some of the reviews and stuff, and it seems, I'm not the only one who's picked some of this out. And I think it's even more tone deaf from the publisher imprint. And I've kind of learned more since then that like a lot of these covers are approved like a year out and start printing months before release, plenty of months before release. I think that it doesn't help the fact that like it feels like it's very stereotypical bisexuality and rainbow washing and all of that. And the quote on the front of the cover is by Gretchen Felkner, who, a lot of us may know is the author of Manhunt. And it's been called out recently over the last couple of months for being extremely biphobic. A lot of content and tweets and stuff from her Twitter back in the day, which is why she's no longer on the platform, really touted a lot of biphobia, especially towards women in like women-male relationships who identify as bisexual. She basically invalidated them entirely. It was just like, you're not queer whatsoever, outright. So it's very interesting that in a book that's supposed to be about a bisexual character, you decided to have a quote from somebody who is currently under the gun for being extremely biphobic. Now, keep in mind, that quote was probably chosen by the sales team and marketing and put on the cover and stuff because, of course, she's the author of Manhunt and Cuckoo, which now has a movie adaptation, and is, as far as the queer community and authors are concerned, she's a well-known name. A lot of people put her out first. However, I think that it's just like, there's nothing they could have really done, but it doesn't help the fact that like this book just felt tone deaf and everything. So, did not enjoy it. I gave that a 2 at first. I feel like it's sitting at a 1.5 right now. And a lot of that star like rating is really being lifted up by all the secondary characters who actually had a personality. So that put me in a slump, but I must have done something right because the reading gods were like, we put you in that slump. let's help you out because we don't want to keep you there. And all of a sudden in the mail, I got this. It is Little Rot. It is the infamous Little Rot. Everyone last year, for the last couple of months, since the beginning of the year, I feel like, have been scrambling to get this book, have been wanting this arc. The UK cover, gorgeous. The colors on the US version, gorgeous. As well as the fact that so many people have told me to read this writer. And I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I received this. I got an email asking if I wanted a copy. Of course I did. As I've said many times before, I will never get over getting physical arcs. It feels like the most special thing in the world. So as soon as I got this, I started reading it. And lucky enough, one of the really cool benefits of the internship I currently have at Penguin Random House is that I get access to their audiobook platform, which even has audiobooks for books that have not come out yet. So I get to listen to this on the audio. And I have to say, if you are picking up this book, I really do recommend you pick up the audio because it sounded amazing. It was so immersive. I absolutely love this book. There was a quote in here. Now, y'all know I don't annotate. It's just not my thing. But there was a quote in here that I had to highlight in dog ear because it is so relevant to where I am in my life right now. And I know that I've read it. I know that I've taken screenshots of it, but I really do want to. I read it on my Instagram. I really want to read it here. She was good at that, trying not to put too much pressure on things, trying to fit into slivers of space, press herself against the edges so she wouldn't bother anyone. It was probably why Kalu was so shocked when she stopped doing it, when she looked around and thought, wait, I'm not happy like this. When she's told him what would make her happy, he acted like she'd asked him to kill his own mother. Maybe he thought she would go back to the edges and give him back the space to do whatever he wanted on his own time, but that's the problem with pressing yourself down too much, folding and folding when you're not really made of a material that's suitable for those kinds of creases. At some point, you just spring back up when you can't take another bending, not another pleat more, and upon that, you spring back with force, and your momentum can be quite upsetting to people who didn't expect you to claim your space. A word. A word. Ugh. I teared up when I heard that because it felt exactly with what I'm dealing with in my personal life right now and my relationships. And that's how this whole book felt. It felt, I explain it to people, I'm like, this was 5 stars, by the way. I gave this 5, clear 5. It was so immersive. It really felt like, I explained to somebody, it felt like a Nigerian Belly version of Belly, the movie with DMX in it and Nas. It was just so vivid and technicolor and gritty and underground and hurtful and disgusting and unhinged. This all takes place in a very like multiple point of views. So if you don't like multiple point of views, this ain't for you because you basically hear from almost everyone who is involved in this storyline. I think that we get the point of views of like 6 or 7 different people, and it has to do with queerness and sexuality and pleasure and the pleasure industry and the people who work in that industry and the people who benefit from that industry, and how something that is supposed to be pleasure can be so draining, so disgusting and not natural in some ways, but the most natural thing in others, and how some people think that they are deserved it as opposed to earning it. Some people who are the ones who are forced to give what this deserve is being kind of beaten to the submission of it's a job, how this ruins their idea of what pleasure is or enhances it because they know what real pleasure is. So many different things. It's queer as hell. I mean, everybody in this book is trying to figure out their sexuality. I think Aima and Kalu, you think at first that they're going to be your main characters and they're going to be back and forth between the two of them. And it's not. Aima actually is the least important character, even though you start the book off with her. And I think that that was very interesting that you did that because it kept you on your toes. They're together. They met like kind of in the States and everything. They've been in a long relationship. Then they moved to New Lagos in Nigeria. They start to have issues. essentially the culture there is really kind of pushing them to get married. This idea of like what's expected from your partner as a man. I mean, even partners, period, cheating is not an issue, you know, because regardless of anything, it's respectability politics, which I thought was so interesting to kind of expand on. And basically, Kalu gets in a lot of trouble. There are sex parties in this book. There, trigger warning, there are rape scenes in this book. There's a huge talk of sexual abuse, kidnapping, molestation, many different things within this book. So it's a heavy book. It has to do religion. Oh my gosh, the main pastor of who's like the most famous in this city and stuff is caught doing horrible things, and of course hiding behind religion as a reasoning for those things. And it's just so much that starts happening. It really is a difficult book to read. I think it was comparable to when I had seen the movie Kids, in the sense of how it kind of ends and this conversation of this little rot that happened inside of somebody and how it grows, and that, you know, people aren't, you know, built into the world with this darkness inside them or this ugliness. When you ask, like, how does somebody end up that way and everything, I think that it covered so much. I don't want to talk, it's so hard to talk about this book without giving stuff away that's so important for you to read on your own. And so it's so difficult to talk about, but it's fast paced, so much different representation, bisexuality, both from a man and a woman, transgender, like one of another main character that we get, Olu, is amazing. There's a moonlight kind of relationship between Kalu and another friend, and like their understanding of like what it means to kind of come out in different countries, the possibility of it, what it is in the first place, the understanding of what queerness and being out is in the first place. So much, so many things are covered in this, 300 page, barely, it's not even hitting 300, 275 pages of gold. And I know so many people have told me, you need to read a Nemezi book, and I've been meaning to. So many people have told me, you need to read You Made a Fool of Love with Your Beauty, and I just hadn't picked it up yet. Het, I know, of course, everybody really talks a lot about, and I hadn't picked it up yet. I'm so happy this was my first one, and that it was an ARC and everything. It made it really special, but I absolutely love this. Please go out and get it. It is now available at all booksellers. I cannot thank Riverhead enough for sending me this copy, and it really just was the best thing to read. And then, after that amazing book, I was given another amazing book by another author that I've been told plenty of times to read, and now I finally have gotten a chance to read them, and that's Rivers Solomon. I have been told many, many times for me to read this. I mean, The Deep, a lot of people have told me to read The Deep, and as well as their other works, and there's only so many months in a year, and I picked up Sorrowland mainly because of the intersex representation in this book. That is one identity that I don't know as much about, and so it was really important for me to read some literature about that during this month and to fit it into my TBR, because it's not something that I see a lot of representation in, and it's sometimes lumped in with like the identity of being transgender, when, you know, the two are different for a reason. So I picked up this book, and I was at first a little concerned because it was 12 hours, and I'm usually averaging around 7 to 9 hour books when it comes to my audiobooks. I blew through this in a day. It was amazing. it fit science fiction and horror and cults and aliens and government conspiracies and feral children and non-binary children and intersex mothers and blackness and queerness and indigenous women and lesbianism and bisexuality and the medical system, classism, racism, socialism. I they threw everything but the kitchen sink in this book and somehow made a novel that felt so real and interesting and never felt convoluted to me. It felt like you understood what was happening. You never got lost on how we got anywhere. I recommend this to anybody who likes the idea of the books or respect the books Kindred and Beloved. However, can't have a really hard time getting through those books because of how much trauma, black trauma, is in it. Me. While I completely respect Kendrick and Beloved, I've started those books and I've not been able to finish them just because the black trauma in them is so hard. I can read all day about extreme horror, but to read about historical fiction trauma for black people it turns my stomach. It just truly is. Sometimes I can't stomach it. It's very hard for me to read it. Although I really love the idea of both of those books and I know how beautifully they're written, how amazing they're written. If you like that idea but you can't get through those books, I highly recommend you read Sorrowland. I don't want to give away why the connection is there, but I really do recommend for you to pick it up because it really is a science fiction novel. I would go on a limb and say that I feel like this is definitely a science fiction / horror. I can't explain to you why, but when you read it, you'll get it, especially nearing the end, you'll get why it is. It just felt nostalgic in some way, some of this story, and she grows up, our main character grows up in a cult, a black cult at that. Basically, the early makings of this cult were a lot of people during the 50s who ended up migrating into the wilderness and creating their own society in response to racism and segregation and everything. And in its beginnings, something like that sounds definitely great, a utopia of sorts, especially during that time. And of course, as does happen every time anybody has power in an isolated setting, cults are formed, egos are made, and it turns into something much darker and sinister. And as the book goes on, you find out the truth behind that cult as well. So it felt like it gave me these feelings of almost like watching Eve's Bayou, the movie, if you've ever seen that. There's something about it that had that tinge of nostalgia in it and like oldness in it. I had to pick this up immediately. I gave it a 4.5, not a 5. It nearly got a 5. And the half star really has to do with the ending. There were some things during the ending that felt a little too clean for me. But other than that, this would have been a straight 5. Easily would have been a 5. And I also think that if I hadn't read Little Rot and been as blown away as I was by that one, this could have been definitely a 5. I absolutely recommend you to pick it up. This is gorgeous reading, and I can't wait to read more of River Solomon's work. I know that in October they're releasing, what's it called? It's a house. It's a house of some sort. And it has a really great green cover. I'm probably going to pop it up on the screen. But I'm definitely picking that up and reading that amongst some of the classic horror I've been reading during that time, because if it's any indication of this book, I know I'm going to enjoy it. This is just so great. It was amazing to read. Okay, we're almost done. We're getting there. We're getting to the end of the TV of this wrap up. After I read Sorrowland, I then read The Trees Grew Because I Bled There by Eric LaRocca. Being in the horror community, you hear about Eric LaRocca all the time, especially if you're trying to begin your extreme horror reading. And me, I don't read much extreme horror. I think after I've read this, I have a little bit more confidence now with maybe picking up a book or two. Not often, but just a book or two. And I thought, okay, I'm finally gonna read this. I'm tired of hearing their name. I really want, I need to be in the loop. And I'm so glad I did. Reading this book, collected stories, so it's also an easier read and very digestible, especially if you're just getting into extreme horror, because it's like, okay, I don't have to hear about this for too long. Like, I can kind of move through the story as it goes. And reading this book, I really realized that, and I was talking to your spooky mom on Instagram, Ellie, about this, because she's really into splatterpunk and extreme horror. And I realized you have to be intelligent to read extreme horror. You have to be very intelligent, because your brain has to realize that what is being written is not the plot. It's not the message and everything. These horrible things, or this body horror, or this, gory things that are happening, are not the message for the book, are not the plot of the book. Your brain has to realize, okay, what is this a metaphor for? Why are we talking about this? What is this to bring up in you, in society, in whomever? And I was telling her, I said, I have a newfound respect for something that really pushes you to make that understanding. I told her, I think that I can see now why, the horror community, the extreme horror community and splatterpunk community are having a big reckoning right now amongst a lot of misogynists in the space, of course, because it's very easy, I think, to not be able to weed out who is reading extreme horror because they're actually extremely smart and realize the metaphors and politics and messages that are underneath all of these stories, and who's reading this stuff and writing this stuff because they're a sick individual and they're just acting out these desires they have inside of them. I think that one author who, has gotten a lot of respect for doing extreme horror and splatterpunk extremely well and tasteful and every time, is Wraith James White, who is one of the few black faces in the space writing in splatterpunk. Well, I have not built up the courage to read his work. I have heard many amazing things, and his responses to a lot of the scandals and things that are being kind of aired out now in the splatterpunk space have been amazing, and I've really started to read his Substack and everything. Eric LaRocca is one of the few who also, I think, this is what extreme horror is done well, is realizing those metaphors immediately. I get what this is about and everything. One that really, really stuck to me as a story was I'll Be Gone by Then. It was the second to last story, and it has to do with a author who is Italian, and their mother has gotten extremely sick to the point where their cousin can no longer take care of her, and so she is coming to the States to live with the author. The author resents her entirely, thinks that she is disgusting because of how sick she's gotten, and even imagines possibly accidentally killing her on purpose, or even abandoning her or endangering her, and actually almost does it, and then has a change of heart to come back to her when she's left her in a park, and she's nowhere to be found. And then she basically goes on a manhunt looking for her, and you're hearing this from her point of view about 3 or 4 weeks later, that she still hasn't found her, and that she misses her entirely. I think that was an amazing, for me, it was very hard to read because it's something that I think about a lot. The idea of my parents getting older, that they're going to get older and they're, going to get sicker. It's one of the main things about being human. You either die young or you get old enough where it's old age and you either get sick or, you die before you get too sick. It's just one of the things. And I think that as children, and why so many parents and stuff unfortunately get put into homes, it's unfortunately because of the fact that, one, a lot of us don't have the time to give the proper care that's necessary for our parents, and there's no longer that village of a lot of people living in our houses to share that burden, because it does become, at that point, it does feel like a burden, because as opposed to taking care of a child who you knowingly brought into this world, this is the person who brought you into this world, and there feels like there's not you didn't ask for that responsibility. It was put on you. And so this resentment grows inside of you, having to take care of them, as well as the fact that if they're sick, they start to become less and less of the person that you have known as that person for so long. And it's very hard. I know that my mom experienced it while taking care of my grandmother, my granny, near the end of her life and everything. And it was very hard for even me to see, because you just know this person as who they were and not who they are now. And then once they're gone, that resentment is replaced with remorse, because they're no longer there and you can't find them, or that you wish that they were still there, even if it meant that you needed to take care of them. And then there's this remorse about that. But by the time you feel that way, of course, they'll be gone. So like things like that, like that one was an amazing story. I really thought that there was another one in here that had to do, it was a huge body horror one, and I actually think it's the book's namesake, This Trees Grew Because I Bled There, where a woman is constantly giving parts of her body to another man. This man is seeing another woman, and he's told her that he's going to marry her. She doesn't do any of the things that she does for him, his like perverse joys and stuff. And she's like, you told me that it wasn't serious. He goes, things change. And of course, this is supposed to represent the idea that it's a physical manifestation of, you know, women who give their all of themselves emotionally to men who can't even bear to give a second thought to them being in their life permanently, or to actually love them or give any part of them to them. So again, I thought that it was very smart. I think there were some hard conversations that were in here. I ended up giving it a 3.5, just because while I respect it and I think that it's a great book, I would recommend it to people who were trying to get, like, dip their toe into extreme horror. At the same time, I didn't necessarily read it and like, I was like, oh, this is my new favorite, or that I was extremely blown away and I'd be like, oh, I wish I could read this for the first time again. So I did give it a 3.5, just out of respect of like what the novel was doing, and having a good time reading it. Like this wasn't a waste of my time whatsoever. So yeah, very interesting. My last book of the month was finally reading. This was the month of me finally knocking out so many. Like, I finally read Agueke Mezi, I read A River Solomon, I read Eric LaRocca, and now I finally read A Carmen Maria Machado. I'm so excited that I finally got to read all these authors, but I am glad that I got to read Her Body and Other Parties. I've been meaning to read this author for a while, ever since I read her essay in It Came From the Closet, which is a book of essays you should definitely check out. Her essay on Jennifer's body and bisexuality is amazing, and this is a collection of short stories as well. Now, what I will say, I gave this a 3. I enjoyed reading this book, extremely enjoyed reading this book, actually. And however, I think I would have enjoyed it more reading it physically instead of the audiobook. And the reason why is, especially for the bulk of the book, is it's called Especially Heinous. Yeah, Especially Heinous is the name of it. And it's 272 views of Law and Order SVU, and it goes through 12 seasons. I want to say it's 12 seasons of, this is the chunk of these reimagined episodes of Law and Order SVU that involve body possession and like breaking the fourth wall and everything, and it's very interesting. But I think that it took me a minute to get the idea of what was happening. And if you read the actual book, you have like these titles of each episode as you're reading, and instead of just hearing it in these lines. And so I think that it would have been good to see that, like, those markers, so that I could better understand, okay, another episode, instead of hearing it more like it was a paragraph or a chapter. So I do recommend that if you read it. Once I did get it down though, I had to keep on reminding myself, but it was I did really like it. Like, it was very weird. This is a smart girl book. Most definitely a smart girl book. And I personally will say that I might not have been as smart. I think that there's a possibility in the future that I'll reread this in its physical form, because I feel like there's just so much that I was missing with the cues that were used in this book. One story that I really did like, though, that was in here was inventory. So I loved inventory because it started off where it sounded like she was taking inventory, the main character, taking inventory of people that they've slept with and their encounters with them. And as time took, like, as they're talking about these encounters that they've had with the people that they've slept with, the story actually builds through those people. And I thought that was such an interesting way to go about telling that story. There were some other things. I think it was a very hard book to kind of get through because it's just about the difficulties of being a woman, like just feeling manic and unhinged and being a woman. And I loved and respected that so much. I really did enjoy this book, but I just feel like if I had read it physically, I would have enjoyed it 10 times more and fully really got the whole idea behind it. Instead, I was kind of hearing it in the stream of consciousness when it's kind of built up. And that's always with short story collections. I feel like audiobooks do an amazing job if they don't do a full cast for these of, like, you know, the short stories. Audiobooks are a great way to read, but when it comes to a short story or anything that is like an interesting or different interior, it sometimes gets lost in the sauce because there's not enough there for you to kind of get information from. So this was her debut novel though, so kudos. But yeah, I gave it a 3. I think the more I think about it, I want to give it a 3.5 because I really do. A lot of the stories in here were just women being imperfect, which I love. I love imperfect women and unhinged characters and everything. And that's definitely what's this book about. I really do want to reread the portion that was the SVU portion because it was a very interesting story hearing it kind of work out. So I finally read it. I finally read this, and I finally read Carmen Maria Machado. Next is In Her Dream House. I'm going to read it. I didn't read that first just because it's kind of like a fictional memoir type of thing, and I wanted to kind of get her short story, her debut, out first. But I will be reading it next. I really do like her reading style, but I do realize that, like, this is smart girl reading. This is definitely smart girl reading. Again, with the metaphors and everything. So that was all of my reading for June. I had an amazing time this month reading. I mean, other than the Z word basically slowing me down and tripping me up, all of my other reads were 3s or 3.5s or 4.5. I had a 5 that I wish I could have even given a 6. Like, Little Rot, we're giving you a 6. You're off the Richter scale. But it was so great reading all these novels. I mean, honestly, I didn't get to Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay. You know, I wanted to give him another chance after reading the Paul Bears Club, being very frustrated with where that book went, and also because it was giving the ace representation that I unfortunately didn't really find much of, well, in my search, as well as I didn't get to finish my physical reads and stuff. But I will say Night of the Living Queers is something that I want to keep on chipping away at, along with Come Out. So we will see. I have another arc that I need to finish by July 2nd. We will see if that is done and read. I'm not sure. I don't know. I really do want to read it before, though. And I want to keep up with my arcs. It's always a pleasure to get them, so I want to try and not put them to waste, you know? That being said, that's probably a good segue into what I'll be reading next month. This is a long one, guys. This video today is definitely a long one. So buckle in. You know, you've already gotten halfway through. We just got to get through the rest. I am going to be participating in Gabby Reed's Summerween readathon, a reading challenge, again this year. I participated in her Winterween challenge earlier this year, and last year I read, when I was first starting out in like kind of the Bookstagram area, I read for Summerween, and I read It Came From the Closet during that readathon, along with High Desert, which was a great graphic memoir. I did a 24-hour read of The Only One Left. That was really great. If you're not familiar with Summerween, it is a challenge that Gabby reads on YouTube, does every year. I think this is like the 4th year, I want to say, maybe, where there are 5 different prompts as well as Instagram prompts as well, which I always have fun with. I like doing some reels. I haven't done any reels on Instagram in a while just because of how long it takes to kind of do some of them, but I kind of do some posts that are like interesting and something different from the constant cycling of my YouTube screenshots and my reviews and like recommendations. So this year the prompts are: read a book in the dark, read a thriller or horror book, read a book with a night sky on the cover, read a book with 5 words in the title, read a book that takes place in the summer. Now, some of these are layups, and I was like, oh, these are much easier than I feel like last year's were. But read a book in the dark is a classic. They do that one every year. Read a thriller or horror book, that's inevitable, for me at least. Read a book with a night sky on the cover. That one was a little bit harder. That was actually one that you had to work on. Read a book with 5 words in the entire. That was another one. And then read a book that takes place in the summer. So it had like 2 that were like, okay, these are layups. And then 3 that were like, oh, okay, these are a little bit more creative. As for the Instagram prompts, post your TBR. This happens over a full week. So this is a full week of a reading challenge. Post your TBR. Post book spines with orange, pink, and purple to make a sunset. Post a reel of your reading routine. Post a picture of your current read. Post a picture of a book with black or orange on the cover. Post a picture of a book in nature. And post your final read. So the plan is that I will participate with the Instagram prompts and everything. As far as the reading prompts are concerned, my TBR for this upcoming month of July is basically surrounding the Summerween prompts. Now, July is one of the few months in the year that really does not have a heritage kind of theme. At least not one that I'm willing to really celebrate. Like the 4th of July, Independence Day happens during July. Okay. I'm personally not going to be reading just American novels. I guess I could do it where it's like, oh, like books that have to do about America and things. Like something like Ring Shout would be applicable to that. I like that there are some months that don't really have any sort of heritage or history month or anything compared to it, because it means that I kind of have some free time to read some things that may just be popular and don't fit necessarily in a box for some other heritage month and everything. July is like that, and August is like that. So I kind of have some space to breathe, which is exciting because I have some books to knock out for certain. I already talked about this one. It was an ARC that I received, and it's coming out July 2nd. I'm hoping that I can maybe just knock this out, that it's really good and I can knock it out. I have the audiobook, so I can read it as quickly as I can. And that is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Look at this cover. We love it. It's slimy. It's natural. Here, let me get out the screen. It's gorgeous. I really love the cover design for this. It was really, really great. But I really do want to read this. I'm not certain. This is a mystery. Like, there's somebody who goes missing, a kid who goes missing during the summertime at summer camp or something. I'm not absolutely certain on what this book is about. It seems like a mystery, though. I'm going to read the back of it just so that you guys aren't left hanging on what it is. When a teenager vanishes from her Adirondack summer camp, 2 worlds collide. Early morning, August 1975, a camp counselor discovers an empty bunk. Its occupant has gone missing, but Barbara Van Laar isn't just any 13-year-old. She's the daughter of the family that owns the summer camp and employs most of the region's residents. And this isn't the first time a Van Laar child has disappeared. Barbara's older brother similarly vanished 14 years ago, never to be found. As a panicked search begins, a thrilling drama unfolds, chasing down the layered secrets of the Van Laar family and the blue-collared community working in its shadow. Moore's multi-threaded story invites readers into a rich and gripping dynasty of secrets and second chances. The God of the Woods is Liz Moore's most ambitious and wide-reaching novel yet. So yeah, it's a mystery. It's a mystery. People are going missing. This one is a little thick. She's a little thicker. She is a little thicker, but I'm seeing a lot of dates in here, so I'm thinking we're traveling. We're time traveling. I'm thinking we're definitely doing some time traveling. This is a thick one. This one is 476 pages. I don't know if I'm going to get it done in time, to be honest with you. But I am excited to read this one. We will see, but I do want this to be read. It's on my TBR. It will be read. A review will come out, whether it's before the arc, before the release date, or slightly after. We also have Home is Where the Bodies Are. Look at this. This is the special edition Barnes & Noble packaging that looks like a cassette tape, which I'm a sucker for a great cover and everything. Of course, VHS cassettes are in style this year. Between this one, Paul Tremblay, I think, put out, was it Paul Tremblay who wrote the new one? That's like the horror movie. There's like a couple of horror movie ones. I think there's 2 other VHS cassette tapes out that are in the horror thriller genre as well. We really just use cassette tapes up. But I will say this was amazing packaging. And as far as the exclusive is concerned, this was I was definitely willing to pay like an extra $1 or so for this to be the one that I got as an exclusive. Of course, they have this horrible sticker on the front of it, but at least it's a sticker and not just built into the movie. See, look, I'm already saying that. Geneva Rose. I know that a lot of people have been reading some of her work lately. I forget what book it is, but it's been very polarizing. I've not heard anybody say anything about this one yet, which is concerning, but I did want to read it. Essentially, the main character, her mother passes, and her sister and her brother are cleaning out their house and everything. They find some VHS tapes, and essentially they find out that their father was a serial killer. So, very interesting. So, that is basically where this book is happening. I thought that it sounded really great. The cover, as far as the actual like summerween challenge is concerned, it has a night cover, a night sky. Well, I don't know about a night sky. It does have like a night kind of thing going on the front of it. Home is where the bodies are. Yep, there we go. There's 6 words in that one. It's definitely a thriller. You could choose to read this one. I mean, all of them, any book that you choose can be like, you can read it in the dark. So that one is kind of a layup. What's another one? Takes place during the summer. I think this one takes place in the summer because it has a VHS on the front that says summer 1989. I don't know if this book per se, the whole thing takes place in the summer or something. I don't know about that one. I think possibly though, because they're talking about like this VHS tape took place in 1999. So I think there's summer elements in here. Another one that is on my TBR for July is one that I'm super excited to read. And I've not been able to read it because it's not really fit anything and it's by a white man. So I've not been able to read it because of my TBR. Of course, like to diversify my reading. But I really, really love Ready Player One. And so I could not wait for the opportunity to have Ready Player 2 finally be read. Considering that, of course, I do like the movie. I know that's polarizing as well. But the movie actually covers, I think, portion of, I think it's loosely based on like the second book. Pretty much has a lot of the first book. I saw a lot of the similarities. However, the books are much darker, which I really appreciated. And it was very, very interesting and just a lot more, which I love. That's why I really loved reading this. But it still felt very, very nostalgic. I'm wondering if this is going to be just as nostalgic as far as its references to the 80s and everything. But yeah, I've been really excited to read this. It's been sitting on my shelf for months now, and I decided this was when I was going to read it. Now, here's the thing. Is it a horror or thriller? No. Is it placed in summer? No. Does it have 5 words in the title? No. However, this is a night sky. So, This one, we're counting. I'm not going to read them in this order. Let me say that as much. I think that I won't read this one just yet. And it will just probably be a July read. I'm worried that it's not going to be as good as the first one was. But I have to read the second one because it left on a cliffhanger for the first one and it didn't even finish everything. Like, whereas the movie, like, they get through all of the different things Halliday had put, they didn't put that in the first one. Which I'm fine with because they fit so much more storyline and, like, darkness and everything in it. So I'm fine with that. But it did push me to buy this book. Going back to the Summerween reads, this one definitely is going to be read for Summerween, and that is S.A. Cosby's All the Sinners Bleed. I am finally reading an S.A. Cosby book. Again, everybody in the world has read this author, and I've been dragging my feet, not been able to fit it in wherever I can, and then I found this at the thrift store in mint condition, mind you. Like, this is a brand new book. I don't think they opened it. There's nothing here that says that it was ever really owned. It just, I don't know how this happened. It just was sitting there, brand new, sitting at the thrift store. So I had to pick it up. And now I finally have, especially it's a hardcover. Like, those things get pricey. But I'm really, really excited to pick this up. We have A Night Sky. No, this is only four words. We have A Night Sky, though. This is a thriller. It takes place during the summer. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But regardless, it has a night sky, like, clearly on it. Titus Crown is the first black sheriff in the history of Sharon County, Virginia. In recent decades, Sharon has only had 2 murders. After years of working as an FBI agent, Titus knows better than anyone that while his hometown might seem like a land of moonshine, cornbread, and honeysuckle, secrets always fester under the surface. Then, a year to the day after Titus's election, a school teacher is killed by a former student, and the student is fatally shot by Titus's deputies. Those festering secrets are now out in the open and ready to tear the town apart. As Titus investigates the shootings, he unearths terrible crimes and a serial killer who has been hiding in plain sight, haunting the dirt lanes and woodland clearings of Sharon. With the killer's possible connections to a local church and the town's harrowing history weighing on them, Titus projects confidence without losing the case while concealing a painful secret from his own past. At the same time, he also has to contend with a far-right group that wants to hold a parade and celebration of the town's Confederate history. Sharon is Titus's home and his heart, but where faith and violence meet, there will be a reckoning. Powerful and unforgettable, All the Sinners Bleed confirms S.A. Cosby as one of the most muscular, distinctive, grab you by both ears voices in American crime fiction. I'm ready. So this really seems really great. Everyone in the world always tells me to I need to read S.A. Cosby. I know it's not Razor Blade Tears, but I thought I had this already. So we're reading it. That's next on my TBR. This one also is for Summerween, and I will definitely read this during Summerween because it feels super appropriate, and that's You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Barron. One queer author. I believe that the main character is also queer, but I am not certain on that. Essentially, this YA novel that everybody had lost their mind about, I want to say about a year or so ago. A lot of people were reading this book. I also found this at the thrift store in great condition and picked it up. The main character works at a summer camp that's kind of a horror slasher camp. They do it on purpose. It's kind of like a haunted attraction type of thing. And of course, people actually do start dying, and our main character is trying to fight to be a final girl throughout all the things that are happening at this summer camp. So yeah, she's just trying to survive the night. Oh yeah, the main character and her girlfriend. That's the main basis of this. The cover is amazing. Absolutely love this cover. This is gorgeous. It's a gorgeous cover. And I can't wait to read it. This one definitely screams Summerween and summertime and everything. So right now I feel like this one, I feel like The Gods of the Woods, because that takes place at a summer camp, and All the Sinners Bleed feel like absolutely I have to read during Summerween. Everything else feels a little bit more like, no, maybe Home is Where the Bodies Are. I don't know. We will see once I start reading them what calls to me better. But this definitely feels like it should be read during Summerween. So I'm excited. And my last read for my TBR in July, and possibly for Summerween, is Gone Girl. Now, I don't have the cover for this because I thrifted it. So it's just the black because the jacket obviously disappeared a very long time ago. But this is Gone Girl, the infamous Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I am finally going to read this novel. I have been wanting to for so long. So many people have told me to read this book because of the just unhingedness of it all, and I'm finally going to read it. I love the movie. It's honestly so unhinged and amazing, and I love it. So I'm finally going to do it, y'all. I'm going to read Gone Girl. If you don't know what Gone Girl is about, it literally has to do with a wife who stages her own death in order to be free of her life with her husband. However, her husband is still like looking for her, and it's like a conspiracy. She's a murderer of some sort. She's like insane and is like living a double life of some sort. I haven't seen Gone Girl the movie in a very long time, to be honest with you, and I'm doing this all from memory because the jacket is missing. But I'm super excited to read this finally. So many people have told me, and in all honesty, I've been wanting to read Gone Girl for an extremely long time. It just seems like the type of book that I would love because of the unhingedness of it all. So we're going to try and knock this out during July. I feel like it's more of a summer book. So for Summerween, it felt appropriate. But looking at what I need to read, the idea that I could finish, how many of these? 5 books in a week while working seems absolutely asinine. But I did finish 4 books last year during a week. And even early this year during Winterween, I nearly finished 4 again. I finished 3, but I nearly finished 4. I don't know. We'll see. I may surprise myself. I know I surprised myself with how much I read this month. Regardless of the fact that I didn't finish my TBR, I read a ton. I read way more than I usually do any other month. So, a win is a win. We're accepting a win as a win. And that's it for today's wrap up and TBR. It was a long one, y'all, and that's because of how much I read this month, and how much I plan to read next month. It is a lot, but had so much fun reading this month. I still have so much more to read now. I mean, as always, I'm constantly finding new recommendations every month and finding new things to read, and now I have all these new favorite authors. Like, really, all of my reads this month were really amazing, aside from, the Z word. But I found some brand new books. I would have to say that Little Rot, Sorrowland are currently sitting neck and neck with The Women Could Fly. I think right now, those are my top 3 for the year right now. I would definitely say that. I plan on doing the mid-year freakout tag soon. Very, very soon. I know that most people did that in June because that's technically the mid-year, but I mean, it's split down the middle. There's 6 months and 6 months. So I think if I do the first weeks of July, we'll still be fine. But I really do think right now, I'm looking at both those books being, those are top 3 right now, as far as this year is concerned. That's saying a lot, because I really did love Chlorine. I really did love Jackal. The Black Girl Survives in this one. It's been a great reading year so far, looking back. But this month was really great. I got in a lot of great reads. Very, very excited to keep the ball rolling in July. Let's hope. I heard that Geneva Rose has been putting a couple people in some slumps. So let's hope this book isn't one of them. But until then, please subscribe down below if you enjoyed today's video. I post book content like this, and I love horror, thriller, speculative fiction, and sad girl, weird girl lit fic, as well as it is Halloween hunting season. I know, for some of y'all who don't love the holidays, you're like, it's hot outside, you're crazy. How are we already talking about fall? But for some of us who are on a budget and love to get things for that special time of year, they start putting these things out in the stores come June, July. So that being said, you might have already noticed already, I have a couple of Halloween hunting and Halloween haul videos on my channel already. If you do like those videos, please subscribe, because I have one coming up, as well as more in the future that'll be coming up, along with some craft videos for the holidays and everything. We have a lot going on. It is the summer. We're hitting the ball fast. We're hitting it going. And basically now until the end of the year, we're moving. We're just moving with a lot of content. Book content, craft content, art content. We're vlogging now. It's crazy. So subscribe down below. Please give me a like if you did like this video. Let me know what you'll be reading this July and if you found any new favorites during the month of June. And I will see y'all in the next one. Bye!